In a courtroom filled with power and privilege, one innocent question from a young boy shatters the illusion of justice being reserved for the wealthy. What happens when the truth can't be ignored? Elijah's small fingers grip the edge of his shirt as he takes slow, careful steps toward the witness stand. His sneakers, slightly scuffed from playing outside just days ago, squeak against the polished courtroom floor. The space around him feels enormous, the ceilings too high, the walls too cold. The room is silent, save for the quiet rustling of papers and the occasional whisper of lawyers conferring under their breath. But all eyes are on him, a 6-year-old boy, alone. His mother sits across the room at the defense table, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She isn't crying. She never cries in front of him. But Elijah knows she is afraid. He can see it in the way her shoulders tense, in the way her eyes flicker toward him every few seconds, as if she wants to reach out and hold him, but can't. She is not supposed to be here. She is supposed to be home with him, making his favorite peanut butter and banana sandwiches, singing along to the old records she plays when she cleans. She is supposed to be tucking him in at night, telling him that no matter what, everything will be okay. But right now, nothing feels okay. Elijah's heart pounds in his chest as he climbs onto the tall chair, his legs dangling above the floor. The judge watches him with a gaze that is neither kind nor cruel, just observant, measuring. The jury members, an assortment of strangers whose faces blur together, sit motionless, waiting for him to speak. He doesn't understand everything that is happening. He doesn't understand why people in suits keep using words too big for him to follow, why his mother has to sit in that chair across from them, looking so small when she has always been so strong. But he understands one thing. They think she did something bad, and it is up to him to tell them she didn't. He swallows hard, his little hands tightening into fists on his lap. The microphone in front of him feels too close, the weight of the room pressing down on him from all sides. His mother once told him that telling the truth was the most important thing a person could do. That no matter what, no matter how scared he was, the truth would always matter. So he will tell them. He will make them listen. The lawyer steps forward, his voice gentle but firm. "Can you tell us your name?" Elijah's voice is small but steady. "Elijah Carter." The lawyer nods, offering him an encouraging smile. "Do you know why you're here today, Elijah?" He glances at his mother before turning back to the lawyer. His little voice doesn't waver. "To help my mom." The room, already quiet, seems to grow even stiller. For the first time, the power shifts, not because of the attorneys, not because of the judge, but because of the little boy sitting in the witness stand. Because everyone in that courtroom, every juror, every lawyer, every person watching, knows that this moment is not just about a case. It is about a child fighting for his mother. And nothing in the world is more powerful than that. Elijah doesn't remember a time when his mother wasn't working. She is always moving, always pushing forward, always carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. From the moment the sun rises to long after it sets, she is in motion, cleaning houses, working the late shift at the diner, taking whatever job she can to keep food on the table. He remembers nights when she would come home too exhausted to do anything but collapse onto the couch, barely able to take off her shoes before sleep claimed her. But no matter how tired she was, she always made time for him and his siblings. She would braid his sister's hair in the dim glow of the kitchen light, whispering lullabies under her breath. She would press a kiss to Elijah's forehead before bed, telling him, "Tomorrow will be better. She worked for them, sacrificed for them, and now they were trying to take her away. The accusation had come suddenly, a cruel shock that turned their world upside down. The wealthy businessman, Mr. Alderman, claimed that she had stolen money from his office while working as a janitor at one of his properties. A small amount, barely enough to make a dent in his fortune, but enough for him to press charges. She swore she didn't do it. Elijah believed her. He knew she was telling the truth. But the truth did not seem to matter. Mr. Alderman was powerful, the kind of man whose name carried weight in the community. He owned businesses, apartments, and even had friends in the courtroom. The kind of man who never had to struggle, who had never gone to bed hungry, who had never worked 3 jobs just to keep the lights on. And yet, here they were, his mother, shackled by an accusation she could not fight alone, and Elijah sitting in a courtroom that felt too big, too cold, too unfair. The evidence was stacked against her. The security footage was blurry, barely showing anything at all, but it was enough for people to believe what they wanted to believe. The word of a wealthy man carried more weight than the truth of a struggling mother. Elijah hated it. He hated the way people looked at her now, as if she had already been found guilty. He hated the way the jury sat still, their faces unreadable, as if his mother's entire life wasn't hanging in the balance. He hated the way Mr. Alderman sat so casually, his expensive suit unwrinkled, his expression smug. But most of all, he hated feeling powerless. He was just a kid, just 6 years old. What could he do? The weight of it all pressed against his small shoulders, but he refused to let it crush him. His mother always told him that strength wasn't about how big you were, it was about how much you were willing to fight for what was right. And right now, she needed him to fight. He couldn't make the businessman tell the truth. He couldn't undo the lies that had been told. He couldn't erase the way the system was built to work against people like his mother. But he could tell his story. He could make them listen. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. Elijah's name is called, and the room stills. The courtroom, which had been filled with murmurs and quiet conversation just moments ago, now feels impossibly silent. The only sound is the heavy thud of the judge's gavel as he signals for order. Elijah swallows hard. His hands feel clammy, his small legs wobbly as he slides off his chair and makes his way to the witness stand. His heart pounds in his chest like a drum, but he keeps moving. His mother's eyes are on him, filled with love and quiet strength, but he can also see the fear. She needs him to be strong. He climbs onto the seat, his feet dangling just above the floor. The microphone in front of him feels too close, too big, but he sits up straight, trying to be as tall as possible. He can do this. He has to do this. The lawyer approaches, his voice calm but firm. "Elijah, can you tell us who you are?" He clears his throat, trying to steady his voice. "Elijah Carter." "And why are you here today, Elijah?" He glances at his mother before answering. "To help my mom." His words are simple, but they carry a weight that no one in the room can ignore. The lawyer nods, walking slowly, his hands folded behind his back. "Can you tell us what happened the night of the so-called incident?" Elijah grips the arms of the chair, inhaling sharply. "My mom was working late, like always," he begins, his voice growing steadier. "She came home tired. She always comes home tired. But that night, she was scared." He swallows hard. "She said something was wrong." The lawyer listens, nodding encouragingly. "What do you mean, wrong?" Elijah glances at the jury, his small fingers clenching the fabric of his pants. "She said they were trying to blame her for something she didn't do." His mother closes her eyes briefly, her lips pressed together. She was crying. Elijah continues, his voice softer now. She never cries in front of us. The lawyer lets the words settle before stepping back. Thank you, Elijah. For a moment, the room is still. Then, the defense attorney stands. He is a tall man with a smooth voice and a smirk that never seems to fade. He buttons his expensive suit and walks toward Elijah with slow, measured steps. Elijah, he begins, his tone lighter, almost condescending. You love your mother, don't you? Elijah frowns. Yes. And you would do anything to help her, right? Yes. The lawyer nods as if he's just proven a point. So, it's fair to say that you want to believe she's innocent? Elijah blinks. She is innocent. The lawyer chuckles softly, shaking his head. But how do you know that? You weren't at her job that night, were you? Elijah shakes his head. You didn't see what happened, did you? Elijah shifts uncomfortably. No, but you want to believe her? The lawyer interrupts, his smirk widening. He turns to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a child who doesn't understand the complexities of the legal system. He's here because he loves his mother, and while that's admirable, it doesn't make her innocent. The words cut deep. Elijah clenches his fists, his stomach twisting. He feels small, like a bug under a magnifying glass, being picked apart by someone who doesn't care about the truth, only about winning. Tears sting his eyes, but he bites his lip, trying to keep them in. Then, the lawyer delivers the final blow. The truth is, Elijah, sometimes people do bad things, even people we love. Something inside Elijah snaps. He feels the heat rise in his chest, his breath coming out uneven. The frustration, the helplessness, the overwhelming unfairness of it all. He can't hold it in anymore. His small fists slam against the armrest of the chair as he shouts, his voice cracking, "Is justice only for the rich?" The words ring out, sharp and raw, cutting through the air like a blade. The entire courtroom goes silent. The jury, the lawyers, even the judge, all of them freeze. The smirk disappears from the defense lawyer's face. Elijah's tears finally spill over, but he doesn't care. "You're not even listening to me," he chokes out, his voice thick with emotion. "You just think I don't matter." The weight of his words crashes down on the room. For the first time, people shift in their seats, not out of discomfort, but out of shame. The jury members exchange uneasy glances. Even the judge, who has remained neutral throughout the trial, looks down, his expression unreadable. The power in the room has shifted. Not because of evidence, not because of legal arguments, but because a 6-year-old boy just exposed the truth that no one wanted to say out loud. And now they can't ignore it. The silence in the courtroom is suffocating. Elijah's words, "Is justice only for the rich?" hang in the air like an unshakable truth, echoing long after his small voice has gone quiet. The weight of them is too heavy to ignore, pressing down on everyone in the room. The lawyers, the jury, the judge, no one dares to speak. Elijah sniffles, wiping his tear-streaked face with the sleeve of his jacket, but he does not look away. His small chest rises and falls with the force of his emotions, his wide, innocent eyes searching the faces before him. He does not fully understand the complexities of the law, but he understands what is fair and what isn't. And right now, every adult in this room is being forced to face that same question. The defense lawyer, who just moments ago had been so smug, so confident, now looks rattled. His carefully constructed argument, the one designed to make Elijah's testimony seem insignificant, has crumbled. He clears his throat, shifting uncomfortably as he glances toward the jury, but their expressions have changed. No longer detached, no longer indifferent. They are listening, and worse for him, they are feeling. For the first time in the trial, doubt creeps into their faces. The woman in the second row, who had barely reacted throughout the proceedings, now looks down, twisting her hands in her lap. The man beside her, who had once seemed bored, now wears a tight-lipped expression, as if questioning everything he thought he knew about this case. The defense lawyer takes a step forward, trying to regain control. "Elijah," he begins, but his voice wavers slightly. "I understand that this is a difficult time for you, but—" Elijah shakes his head, his small voice interrupting him. "No, you don't." His fingers grip the edge of the witness stand. "You don't understand at all." The lawyer falters, caught off guard by the firmness in Elijah's voice. From the defense table, Mr. Alderman, the wealthy businessman who had accused Elijah's mother, shifts in his seat. His face, which had remained impassive for most of the trial, now shows a flicker of annoyance, perhaps even fear. The jury has seen something today that no legal argument can erase: the raw, unfiltered truth from a child too young to understand deception, but old enough to recognize injustice. At the front of the room, the judge watches it all unfold. For most of the trial, he has remained stoic, his expression unreadable, his presence commanding but distant. He has followed the process, listened to the facts, maintained order. But now, something in him shifts. He sits up straighter, his hands resting on the bench before him. His eyes, once impartial, now reflect something different. Conflict, realization, guilt. Elijah's words are still ringing in his ears. He has presided over cases like this before, cases where the accused had little power, where wealth and influence dictated the outcome. He had always told himself that justice was blind, that the law was the law. But now, looking at this 6-year-old boy, he feels something unfamiliar creeping in. Doubt. Has he been blind? His gaze drifts to the prosecution table where Elijah's mother sits, her face lined with exhaustion and quiet dignity. She has not spoken out of turn, has not pleaded, has not begged. She has only sat there, trusting the system to see the truth. But what if the system never intended to? The judge clears his throat, his voice coming out heavier than before. "I think we've heard enough." The room shifts as people exchange glances. The defense lawyer looks up sharply. "Your Honor, I would like to—" The judge raises a hand, silencing him. "We have heard enough." For the first time, his voice carries something different. Not just authority, conviction. Mr. Alderman shifts again, straightening his tie, as if that will restore the power he has just lost. His gaze flickers toward his lawyer, but there is nothing the man can do now. Elijah has done what no legal team, no amount of money could undo. He has humanized the case. And now, everyone in the room, including the judge, must face the question they had all been ignoring. Is justice only for the rich? As the judge leans forward, his hands clasped before him, the answer to that question is suddenly not as clear as it once was. The courtroom is thick with tension as the jury files back into their seats. The air is heavy, each breath held in anticipation. Elijah grips the arm of his chair, his small fingers pressing into the worn fabric. His mother sits beside him, her hands clasped together, her face composed but betraying the fear she refuses to show. The judge looks over the room before addressing the jury. Has the jury reached a verdict? A woman in the front row stands, her expression unreadable as she clutches the paper in her hands. The entire room leans in, waiting. The businessman, Mr. Alderman, sits rigid, his confidence from earlier now replaced with unease. She clears her throat. We, the jury, find the defendant. She pauses for a fraction of a second, but it feels like an eternity. Not guilty. Silence. For the briefest moment, the weight of the words hangs suspended in the air, as if no one can quite believe them. And then, relief, crashing over Elijah like a wave. His mother lets out a breath she had been holding for too long, her shoulders slumping as the tension seeps from her body. Her eyes shine with unshed tears, but she does not cry. Not yet. Elijah turns to her, his tear-streaked face breaking into a trembling smile. "You're free," he whispers, his voice thick with emotion. She pulls him into her arms, holding him close, her fingers pressing against his back as if reassuring herself that this is real, that this nightmare is over. The judge bangs his gavel for order, but the murmurs in the courtroom continue. People exchange glances, whispers spreading like wildfire. The shift is undeniable. Elijah, a 6-year-old boy, had changed everything. Mr. Alderman's face is tight, his jaw clenched. He looks around, searching for support, but finds none. The power he once wielded so effortlessly has slipped through his fingers, replaced by something he cannot control: truth. The defense lawyer, the man who had smirked at Elijah's testimony, looks shaken. His arguments had been logical, calculated, backed by experience and law. And yet none of it had withstood the impact of a child's simple, honest words. Elijah had asked a question that no one in that courtroom could ignore. Is justice only for the rich? And for the first time, people were forced to answer it. The judge dismisses the case, but the impact of what has happened lingers. Elijah and his mother stand, and as they turn to leave, something unexpected happens. The jurors, the same people who had once been indifferent, stand as well. One by one they rise, not speaking, not clapping, just standing in quiet recognition. It is not celebration, it is acknowledgement. Elijah's words had not just freed his mother, they had forced a shift, a crack in the foundation of a system that had long ignored voices like theirs. As they step out of the courtroom, the crowd outside is waiting. Reporters, onlookers, strangers who had followed the case, they are all there. Some faces are unfamiliar, but others belong to people from their own community. People who had once felt powerless, just like them. A woman, standing near the front, wipes a tear from her eye before whispering, "That boy is going to change the world." Elijah grips his mother's hand as they walk forward, past the cameras, past the murmuring crowd. He does not understand everything that has happened today, not fully, but he knows one thing. He had spoken, and people had listened. The echoes of Elijah's words did not fade when the courtroom doors closed behind him. They lingered, heavy and undeniable, forcing everyone who had witnessed them to confront a truth they could no longer ignore. Justice, real justice, should not be reserved for those with wealth and influence. It should not bend under the weight of money or status. And yet, Elijah's mother had come dangerously close to losing her freedom, not because of what she had done, but because of who she was, a hard-working woman without the means to fight a system designed to work against her. Elijah's courage changed that. A 6-year-old boy, with no legal expertise, no power, and no authority, had done what no attorney, no argument, no piece of evidence could do. He had exposed the flaw at the heart of the case, the assumption that justice belonged only to those who could afford it. His question, "Is justice only for the rich?" had not been a rhetorical one. It had been a challenge, a demand, and in the silence that followed, in the shifting expressions of the jury, in the faltering voice of the defense lawyer, that demand had been answered. Justice, when truly pursued, could not belong to just one group of people. It had to belong to everyone. Elijah's bravery reminds us all that the fight for justice is not just for those with power. It is for anyone who has the courage to speak the truth, even when no one wants to hear it. His words did not just free his mother. They forced an entire courtroom to look inward, to question their own biases, to recognize the invisible chains that had been holding so many people down for so long. His story is not just about one case. It is about every person who has ever been silenced, every truth that has ever been dismissed, every battle that has been fought by those who never had the luxury of believing the system was fair. And it is a reminder that change does not always come from where we expect it. Sometimes it comes from the voice of a child. In a world that often feels stacked against those with less power, Elijah's story serves as a testament to the strength of truth, integrity, and the belief that justice can prevail, even when the odds seem impossible. A 6-year-old boy, with no legal expertise, no power, and no authority, had done what no attorney, no argument, no piece of evidence could do. He had exposed the flaw at the heart of the case, the assumption that justice belonged only to those who could afford it. His question, "Is justice only for the rich?" had not been a rhetorical one. It had been a challenge, a demand, and in the silence that followed, in the shifting expressions of the jury, in the faltering voice of the defense lawyer, that demand had been answered. Justice, when truly pursued, could not belong to just one group of people. It had to belong to everyone. Elijah's bravery reminds us all that the fight for justice is not just for those with power. It is for anyone who has the courage to speak the truth, even when no one wants to hear it. His words did not just free his mother. They forced an entire courtroom to look inward, to question their own biases, to recognize the invisible chains that had been holding so many people down for so long. His story is not just about one case. It is about every person who has ever been silenced, every truth that has ever been dismissed, every battle that has been fought by those who never had the luxury of believing the system was fair. And it is a reminder that change does not always come from where we expect it. Sometimes it comes from the voice of a child. In a world that often feels stacked against those with less power, Elijah's story serves as a testament to the strength of truth, integrity, and the belief that justice can prevail, even when the odds seem impossible.